What's up, guys? So I'm probably doing this like a month too early. I mean, it still is mid-July at this point, but I just want to do it anyway. So it's gonna be fantasy football sleepers, guys that are being undervalued so far in 2019, almost at 18. But it's still early. Obviously, average draft positions do change. I didn't even bother listing them at this point because they are definitely going to change. With hype trains and all that kind of stuff. But anyway. First person I want to get into is Josh Allen at the quarterback position. Quarterback of the Buffalo Bills, obviously, 23 years old this season. Definitely has the rushing upside you want to see in a quarterback. Had 631 yards and 11 starts. That would have been 841 rushing yards over a 16-game season. And a lot of times you can find the sleeper based off what they do in the final portion of the season. And if you look at Josh Allen from week 12 on when he came back from his injury, I believe it was after the Bills bye as well, had 27 points followed by 32 points, 18, 21, 13. That was at New England. We obviously know rookie quarterbacks do not fare well against Bill Belichick's defense. Then went on to have 45 fantasy points. I forget who that was against. I believe it was Miami. I didn't list it, of course, but that was an average of 26 fantasy points per game over that span. That's a pretty big sample size as well. And if you look at who the Bills added as receivers, they did bring John Brown over, formerly with the Cardinals and the Ravens, I believe it was. They have Cole Beasley, who spent a long time with the Cowboys, and then Andre Roberts, who I believe was with the Jets last year, had a great year as a kick returner, but is a pretty decent receiver as well. So he definitely adds people there. They still have Zay Jones. They still have Robert Foster as a deep threat. So they do have guys there that can help Josh Allen this year. Last year it was Kelvin Benjamin, who should be playing tight end, has really no talent as a wide receiver at this point, and just a lot of drop balls and stuff like that. So, I mean, his receivers definitely let him down. I think it'll be easier on him this year. His offensive line was ranked in the top half of the league in 2018. They did bring in Cody Ford, I believe, in the draft. I liked him coming out of Oklahoma to play right tackle. His rushing ability definitely offers a safe floor, and you're definitely going to get at least 5 to 6 fantasy points per game off of his rushing alone, and that's not even including his passing yards or potential touchdown upside. You're going into basically every Josh Allen start with a floor of 5 or 6 points. So that's why I love having him. He had 8 rushing touchdowns last season, and with no legitimate goal line threat at running back, he could even increase that number from 8 to even more. Maybe he sees double-digit touchdowns. He obviously did not start every game last year. Did have 11 starts, I believe, played in 12 games, so he came in late in week 1. But he's going to be a really interesting case this year. I'm not sold on him being an elite quarterback in general, but he could definitely be an elite fantasy quarterback in 2019. Up next, we have Ben Roethlisberger, and this one's really puzzling. Of course, Ben's been around forever. Did have a really good season last year, and I think people overlook that fact. But he's being ranked, according to Yahoo, as the 15th quarterback, and it just makes no sense to me whatsoever. I do understand he lost Antonio Brown, who is arguably the best receiver in football, but Juju Smith-Schuster ain't that bad either, and they brought in some other guys I like. There's actually a receiver I'm going to talk about later that the Steelers brought in to replace some of Brown's targets and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, let's get into Big Ben real quick. So Pittsburgh throws the ball a ton. Ben had over 5,000 passing yards last year. I feel like a lot of people are just leaving that out, and led the league in passing attempts. He finished third in fantasy points last season amongst quarterbacks, and now they rank him 15. Once again, does not make much sense to me. I personally took Big Ben a lot in a lot of leagues last year, and it paid off tremendously. I just kind of figured that based off the Le'Veon Bell holdout, and just the Steelers having amazing receivers and Vance McDonald in his second year in this team, they were going to throw the ball a ton, and it definitely paid dividends for me. Big Ben was incredible last season. So, yes, he lost AB, but the Steelers do have plenty of weapons. As I talked about, Juju. Donte Moncrief is there, formerly with the Colts and the Jaguars for one season. James Washington, who Mike Tomlin does love, he hypes him up. Vance McDonald, really good receiving tight end. He's had some nice moments. And then, of course, James Conner. They do have Jalen Samuels as well. So, they have a bunch of guys in Pittsburgh that can catch the ball and get yards after the catch. Big Ben's going to be throwing the ball everywhere with a ton of attempts. I love his upside. And of course, the Steelers have one of the best offensive lines every season, so that's no issue for him as well. And Big Ben definitely wants to prove people wrong. I believe mostly AB. That's just my opinion. And it's kind of like the Russell Westbrook comparison. When Kevin Durant left Russell Westbrook, we saw Westbrook average a triple-double. Well, I think Ben Roethlisberger is going to try to do the equivalent of averaging a triple-double, but at the quarterback position by putting up monstrous numbers and proving to people that he doesn't need Antonio Brown and it should be the other way around, all that kind of stuff. So I think Big Ben is going to try and prove a lot of people wrong this year, and he's going to have a chip on his shoulder. And I think he's going to put up great numbers. I don't know what kind of record the Steelers are going to have, but I think from Big Ben's statistical standpoint, it's going to be a really nice year for him. And I just don't understand why he's being ranked 15th amongst quarterbacks right now in fantasy. Up next at wide receiver, this is going to be Albert Wilson, who will be in his age 27 season, his second season with Miami. First off, if you look at his competition, Kenny Stills, Devontae Parker, Bryce Butler, and Jakeem Grant, not the best, competition of receivers. I do believe Wilson will definitely get playing time on this team as long as he's on the field. As you can see on the bottom there, he is trying to fight back from hip surgery. Should be on track for week 1. It's obviously too early to tell at this point, but if everything goes right, that should be the outcome. So let's look into why I like Albert Wilson. So he believes he's one of the best yards after catch receivers in the league. And if you look at the Pro Football Focus rating on the bottom there, you could tell he is one of the best yards after catch players in the league, ranked first in it last year according to PFF. So he is tremendous with yards after the catch. He's one of the faster receivers in the league. He clocked at 21.74 miles per hour in 2018, which I believe was one of the top 10 times amongst all NFL players. So that's very impressive. Just a really good athlete. Played in only 7 games last season and was on pace for almost 900 yards and 8 touchdowns and a nice catch percentage of 74%. Could be Miami's main slot receiver with Danny Amendola going to Detroit, so they have an open spot there as well. Miami has a decent amount invested in Wilson. They gave him 3 years, $24 million when he came over from the Chiefs, and he's had some monster games before, and I remember seeing him play in this game against Chicago last season. He had 6 catches, 155 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And I remember watching that game on Red Zone, and there was a guy on Miami who was catching screen passes and was just so freaking quick and somehow just eluded like 8 Bears defenders and made his way to the end zone on separate occasions. And it just really opened my eyes. I'm like, who is this guy? And then I think a couple weeks later he got hurt, so he didn't get to finish the season, obviously. And then in 2017 at Denver, I do believe that was the game that Patrick Mahomes started in, funny enough, his first NFL start. Albert Wilson had 10 catches for 147 yards. I do believe if he stays on the field and gets the opportunity, he will have a very nice year. I think receptions-wise, he could be kind of like a Golden Tate type of player. I mean, he's definitely not a physical freak. I don't think he's over 6 feet tall, but he's quick. He has good hands, and he's going to play with Ryan Fitzpatrick and Josh Rosen. If it's Ryan Fitzpatrick, he'll take any kind of risk. I kind of wish it was Josh Rosen instead, because I feel like Josh Rosen is more of the conservative type of quarterback, and Albert Wilson's going to run the short route, so I kind of do prefer Rosen for Albert Wilson's situation. But either way, I'm going to take a shot on him late in drafts, especially if his health is looking good. If he's going to be out the first few weeks, I probably won't draft him, but I might pick him up when he comes back. So it really depends on what his health's going to be. Definitely monitor that, but he's definitely an interesting wide receiver that's going very late in drafts. So on to another receiver, and this time it's the Cleveland Browns' Antonio Callaway. He'll be 22 years old, entering his second season. And when you talk about the Browns, everyone, of course, wants to talk about Odell Beckham, rightfully so, Jarvis Landry, Baker Mayfield, David Njoku, those type of guys. But I feel like Antonio Callaway is slept on a lot. People forget about him. So let's talk about why I like him going into this season. So he was also, just like Albert Wilson, clocked as one of the fastest receivers in football last year. at 21.48 miles per hour. I do believe, if memory serves correct, he ran a 4.440 at the combine, and that was in 2018. So based off his talent, Callaway should have been a first-round pick in the NFL draft in 2018. He set his personal goals next season for over 1,000 yards and over 10 touchdowns. Should be the team's number 3 wide receiver behind Landry and Odell, of course. Has to beat out Rashard Higgins for the number 3 spot. I do believe he should do that and will do that. He saw 79 targets last season, but has big play upside, and he's not too dependable on targets for that reason. Kind of like a DaeSean Jackson type of player. He may only get, 4, 5, 6 targets, but, 2 of those can go for 60 yards to the house, and you have yourself a huge game from him. And, if one of the guys in front of him goes down like Landry or Beckham, he could definitely be a wide receiver too in fantasy football. It was kind of like the Kenny Golladay argument I was making last season, where if someone went down in front of him, like Marvin Jones or Golden Tate, I do believe both of them kind of went down in a way because Tate was traded. Marvin Jones did get hurt, and then Kenny Golladay all of a sudden became a very good fantasy wide receiver. I do believe Callaway's in a similar situation. I believe in Baker Mayfield. I think he's a very good quarterback. He should be really good for fantasy this year as well. And if Callaway sees the target share, he's going to have a nice year. I do believe in the talent for him. It's just a matter of how many targets will he get. It's kind of annoying because a lot of fantasy football is based off volume and how many carries or targets a guy gets. And obviously, here in July, I have no idea how many targets Callaway's going to get. But I do believe if he gets over 100 somehow, whether someone gets injured or he's just more implemented into the offense than we expect, then he could have a very nice year. And he, based on where he's going in drafts, you can basically get a wide receiver 3 for free. So that's definitely a shot I might take in drafts. He's a very good athlete. If you haven't watched his highlights, I recommend doing so. You'll probably fall in love with him right away. I was actually at the Giants preseason game last year where Callaway played in his first NFL action. He took a slant to the house. It was like 60 yards. And then right away, I was very interested. I was like, man, this guy's a really good athlete. Looked into him, and I'm a big fan of Callaway's game. So I do believe if he gets the opportunity, we will be talking about him a lot next year. And I do hope he gets that chance because, as I said, he's a very talented receiver. Up next is the former Penn State receiver, DaeSean Hamilton. He'll be 24 years old this season. And without Emmanuel Sanders on the field, he was a PPR god. I don't want to say god, but he was a really good PPR receiver. Had 5 catches for 49 yards in the first game without Sanders. Followed that up with 6 catches for 40 yards and a touchdown. Followed that up with 7 catches for 46 yards and then 7 catches for 47 yards and a touchdown. So if you play in the full point per reception league, like I do in most leagues, he was definitely getting you over 10 points per game. I owned him in basically all my leagues towards the end of the season. Was a useful player. He averaged 9.5 targets in the games that Sanders missed. Should be the wide receiver 3 behind Courtland Sutton and Sanders, who is coming off the torn Achilles at age 32. And obviously, I don't want to root against him, but the chances that he comes back and makes it through a full season after an injury like that at that age seems highly unlikely. So you never know. I kind of want to keep Hamilton on my bench for that reason. His current quarterback, Joe Flacco, averaged 3.9 air yards per attempt, and Hamilton is definitely a fan of those short routes, so I think him and Joe Flacco would have a nice connection if Hamilton's on the field a lot. And in the final 4 games of 2018, Hamilton had 25 total receptions. Obviously, if you do that over a full season, that would have been 100 because you just take the 25, multiply it by 4. So, as I said, if Sanders were to miss time for some reason, or we find out Sanders is hurt in the preseason and were to miss time, I do believe in PPR leagues, DaeSean Hamilton is going to be very useful. If for some reason, let's just say hypothetically, Emmanuel Sanders did not play this year, I think he'd be a very strong candidate for 70-plus catches and maybe 800 yards or something like that, but would have been really good for PPR purposes. If you're playing in a standard league, I don't really see the value in Hamilton, but I think most people nowadays play in the point per reception leagues, and that's what I do at least, and I do definitely want to target him in drafts for that reason. I hope Sanders plays the full season and Courtland Sutton because they're both amazing receivers, but it's football. Injuries happen. We'll see what happens with that. But I do believe if he is playing as a top 2 receiver on that team, he will see the targets and he will put up numbers. So I definitely will consider him as a bench stash in your drafts. On to the running back position, and here's a familiar name if you played fantasy for a while. It's Carlos Hyde. Was with the 49ers for a long time, then bounced around between the Browns and the Jaguars last season. He'll be 28 years old this year, and I was never a huge fan of Hyde's ability as a running back, but you give me a Chiefs running back and an Andy Reid running back who has the potential to be a workhorse at some point if the guy in front of him goes down. The guy in front of him is Damien Williams, someone who's unproven. I'll get into him later. I just think it's a shot worth taking in drafts based off where Hyde is going. So he does play on one of the best offenses in football. Andy Reid does like to use a workhorse back in his offense. And really the only thing standing in between Hyde and a potential running back 1 type of season is Damien Williams. Now obviously Hyde can come in and get hurt as well, and the whole thing is just a bunch of nonsense. But it is worth the shot in my opinion. It's kind of like the Latavius Murray. Same thing with Darrell Henderson with the Rams. So I mean, if Todd Gurley gets hurt or Alvin Kamara gets hurt, I mean these guys all of a sudden become RB1s, and you're getting them in the double-digit rounds sometimes, the 7th, 8th, 9th round. Seems like shots that are worth taking. So for Damien Williams, he's never had more than 51 carries in a single season and is coming off shoulder surgery that he had in 2017. So that was 2 years ago, but he does have a bit of an injury history. I think he had a concussion in there as well, not positive. So Hyde did have a disappointing season last year at 3.3 yards per carry, but his career average is 4.0 per carry, so I just consider that an outlier because he did play on the Browns and it seemed like he had a rough time there. Probably wasn't acclimated with the Jaguars playbook when he got there, so I kind of gave him a pass for what happened last year. He was bouncing around anyway, was never really given a full workload anyway as a running back. So Hyde does have the ability to be a pass catcher as well, which would definitely help him in a workhorse role when he was with Kyle Shanahan with the 49ers. I believe it was Shanahan's first year. Hyde did have 59 receptions, so he definitely has the ability to catch the ball. He's not known for it, but he could do it. So I do believe Williams is the starter. He should be the starter. But in the event that he has a disappointing season or gets injured, which is very possible, then Hyde could be a top 10 player at the running back position on a great offense with a coach who likes to use a workhorse back. I just think it's just a shot worth taking. There are definitely guys going before him that just don't have the same kind of upside that Carlos Hyde has. And it's only because he's on the Chiefs, obviously. If he was on a different team, let's say he was on the 49ers still, I definitely would not have any interest in Carlos Hyde. But it's his situation and potential volume, if Damien Williams went down, that has me interested in Carlos Hyde. So I do believe based off his situation, it's smart to take him in the 9th, 10th round, wherever he's going by the time drafts come around. So it's definitely a shot I want to take. And if Williams gets hurt and Hyde becomes a top 10 running back in fantasy, I would not be shocked. So we'll see what happens with that, but as I said, do believe it's a shot worth taking. So up next, and I do feel gross saying this honestly, but the guy is going so late in drafts and he's considered a starting running back on an offense that shouldn't be that bad next year, and it's Peyton Barber, who will be 25 years old next season. So of course the Buccaneers took a shot on Ronald Jones last year, had a very, very disappointing rookie season. He shouldn't be as bad, but I'm not really a believer in Ronald Jones right now. So I do believe that Peyton Barber's going to have a chance to be the guy in the Buccaneers backfield where he was last year. He was, pretty high in attempts. I'll get to that later. I do like the fact that they have Bruce Arians. I'm a fan of his, and he does hype up Barber in multiple interviews, but I saw this one specifically where a reporter basically asked him which players did you not expect to see a lot from, but did see a lot from. And his answer was Peyton Barber. Well, his answer at first was Mike Evans, and then he just, laughed about it. And then he went on to say Peyton Barber, and he was surprised because Peyton Barber is a big back, but he says he moves very nicely for a guy of his size and his weight. So, he does have workhorse traits based off his size. And his main competition, as I said, is Ronald Jones and Andre Ellington. And Andre Ellington did work with Bruce Arians in Arizona. There is a connection there, but there's no guarantee Andre Ellington makes the team. He's definitely not fit out for a workhorse role. I mean, some of you who drafted Andre Ellington like 5 years ago in like the third round know what I'm talking about. It didn't really work out for him. So Barber did rank ninth in carries, which is more than guys like Christian McCaffrey, James Conner, and Alvin Kamara. So he definitely got the workload, and that's a huge part of fantasy football, is finding the volume. Sometimes it doesn't matter about efficiency. You don't get points based off of yards per carry. It's just, how much volume a guy gets. If he's getting 18 to 20 carries per week, then that's a guy you got to take, no matter how bad you think he is. Peyton Barber does not impress me as a running back. I've watched him, a pretty decent amount last year. He did carve up my Giants last year, but their defense was awful, so I really don't consider it impressive. But he is a running back that he's not terrible, but he just wasn't impressive. You know what I mean? Like, he's one of those guys that you watch him and you're just like, but he gets the job done. So that's why Bruce Arians probably stick with him. There are players going in front of Barber that probably won't see half of his workload, or will be lucky to see half of his workload. So I just believe if you're going for guaranteed volume, which is something I would like to take, because I always say in sports, you take the sure thing rather than the what if. I could take Nyheim Hines, who's going, I think, right next to Barber in drafts right now, but like, what the hell is Nyheim Hines going to do? Like, what's his upside? Maybe if Marlon Mack got hurt, Hines would have 50, 60 catches. But there's also a chance that Barber can have, 200 something carries and 1,000 yards and maybe double-digit touchdowns on the ground if the Bucs can move the damn football. So it's possible. I do like the Bucs offense as a whole. I do like Jameis Winston more than most people. I mean, most people think Winston's trash, and yeah, that's fine. I mean, that's your opinion. I do think he'll have a nice year this year. They do have Mike Evans, of course, one of the best receivers in football, had a great year last year. Chris Godwin, who might... he's one of the most hyped players in fantasy right now. O.J. Howard could be one of the best tight ends if he stays on the field. Cameron Brate, I believe, is still there at tight end as well. So they have guys that can move the football. And as long as Jameis Winston is just decent this year, they should be fine offensively. And Peyton Barber should see enough goal line work to be a pretty valuable running back. So I do believe there is some opportunity to be a running back too. Maybe he finishes like running back 20, running back 25 in that range, which would be low-end RB2, but it is possible. But based off where he's going in drafts, I'm 100% on board with taking Barber. If for some reason he's like going in the 5th round by August, I'm definitely off of him. But if he's going in like the 9th, 10th round, I am 100% taking Barber based off the workload. And I just feel like that's a no-brainer. I did foreshadow this before, I believe, but this one's going to be Donte Moncrief of the Pittsburgh Steelers this year. It's his first year as a Steeler. I don't want to say he's filling in for Antonio Brown, but like, I really don't know how else to say it. He's basically filling in for Juju, because Juju's going to Brown's spot, and then Moncrief should go to Juju's spot. That's how I'm looking at it. So he does have a very good chance to be the Steelers' number 2 receiver. As I said before with Roethlisberger, Pittsburgh throws the ball a ton, 45 times more than the second-place team, who I believe was the Colts last year. So they're going to throw the ball a lot. I don't see why they would change that philosophy this year. Le'Veon Bell is not coming back, so I just don't think it's going to stop. The Steelers' number 2 receiver from last season, who was Juju, saw a whopping 166 targets. Maybe Moncrief doesn't get 166. I highly doubt he does. But if he can get somewhere between like 110 and 130, that's a very valuable receiver on a Ben Roethlisberger offense. I do think Moncrief's an impressive athlete. He stands at 6'2", runs a 4.4 40, and his vertical is 39.5 inches. Very impressive. He in his one season with 100+ targets, where he had 105, he had 64 catches, 733 yards, and 6 touchdowns. I believe that was with Andrew Luck in Indianapolis. I forget what year, 2015, 2016, one of them. But he can get it done. He just needs the opportunity. He has had injury problems, so he needs to stay on the field, obviously. It could be James Washington, who should be the number 3 receiver. I don't know which one it's going to be. It's kind of a toss-up. Eileen Moncrief, I've liked him for a long time. I think he had an impressive year in Jacksonville last year. He had 668 receiving yards on only 89 targets with Blake Bortles and Cody Kessler. So those 89 targets, I mean, God knows how many of those were actually catchable targets. So yeah, I just think that with a better quarterback and in a better system, as long as he can stay on the field, which is an issue for some of these guys, it kind of goes back to like the Albert Wilson thing. If he can stay on the field, I expect results. I mean, it's basically as simple as that. I believe in the player. It just depends on the opportunity and how many targets and how many games this guy can play. So if Moncrief does play all 16 games, and you told me that right now, I would make sure I get him in all of my drafts. I'm pretty high on him. I love the Steelers' offense for fantasy purposes this year. I liked it last year too, and hopefully it works out for Moncrief. So just stay healthy. And last, you can never hold grudges in fantasy football because in the leagues I pay attention to the most, I took Royce Freeman in both of them. And I spent a third-round pick on him in one league, and I think it was a fourth or a fifth-round pick in the other league. Obviously, it did not work out for me. And if I held a grudge, I wouldn't have him in here. But I feel like people are overlooking him, and I do buy the talent. I bought it last year. Unfortunately, this Phillip Lindsay guy came out of nowhere and took all of his carries and all his production. And Royce Freeman was hurt last year anyway. So this is a new year, a fresh start. I am once again buying into Royce Freeman, and here's why. So he was a third-round pick of the Broncos 2 years ago. Lindsay took over. Who knew? Freeman dealt with a high ankle sprain most of last season, missed a couple games, I believe. It did impact his efficiency. He said himself he was dealing with the injury through all of last year. At this point in camp right now, Freeman is the number one back because Lindsay is recovering from wrist surgery, so there's that. That's a positive. And there is a new coaching staff, and if they see that Freeman's lighting it up in practice or even preseason, if Lindsay's not out there for preseason still, they might just go with Freeman and say, hey, that was last year. This is a different regime. I'm playing the guys that I like, and it might just be like that. So maybe Royce Freeman somehow is a surprising starter next season. I'm not counting on it. I'm just saying it's possible. So Freeman was an absolute monster in Oregon, totaling over 5,600 rushing yards and 64 touchdowns in 4 years. For me, Freeman definitely passes the eye test, as I said before, breaks a ton of tackles. His highlights are fun to watch. There's not many of them, but they are fun to watch. And he's a very good, well, not very good, but he's a really good pass catcher for a big back. I mean, most big backs, you think of like LeGarrette Blount, Adrian Peterson, not natural pass catchers, but for some reason, Freeman looks very fluent in the way he catches the ball. Should not have a problem with that. Definitely has like the workhorse makeup, all that kind of stuff. And even if Lindsay were to start all 16 games and not get injured, which I don't see happening for a guy that frame, he did get pretty lucky last year, stayed on the field for most of it. Freeman, though, should have a role carved out for himself either way. I do believe he'll get the goal line work. As I said, he breaks a ton of tackles, is the much bigger back amongst the two. So I think Freeman either way is going to have a role. And I think there's a good chance not a good chance, but there is a chance that he becomes a really good fantasy asset this year, especially if for some reason Lindsay were to miss time or just Lindsay's ineffective this year or something, or the new coaches don't like Lindsay and prefer Freeman. It's very possible. Who knows? I mean, there's a lot of what ifs and unknowns with the Broncos offense, new quarterback, new offensive coordinator, new head coach, all that kind of stuff. But I buy the talent of Royce Freeman. I could be a sucker. I could be wrong on it for 2 years in a row, and then I'll be done with him for good. But for one more year, I am buying into it, and I hope I'm right. So that will do it for this. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you want me to do more fantasy football related videos, we'll gladly do so. I was thinking of doing like guys I'm avoiding, guys I love this year, that kind of stuff. If you want to see it, let me know in the comments. And as always, thank you for watching.